Hello. In this short video, I'll be giving you a demonstration of the new KeyShot 3 animation system. We're working with a model of a laptop today, and the first thing I'm going to do to really improve playback performance of my animation is put KeyShot into performance mode, and I'll do so by pressing Alt-P on the PC or Option-P on the Mac. The next thing I want to do is pull up my timeline, and I can do so by moving down to the bottom row of buttons and selecting Timeline. Now this is where you can actually play back your animations, and you can add animations via the animation wizard. So I'll click on this button as we pull up my wizard dialog, and here you have a few different options of the different types of animations you can add. You can do model and part animation, you can do camera animations. In this particular demo, we'll go ahead and go with a part animation, and we'll select rotation. So what I'd like to do here is open up this laptop lid. So when I select rotation, that gives me a little preview of what that animation type is going to do for me. And I'll select next, and I'll go ahead and expand my hierarchy here. This basically displays the hierarchy that was brought over from your CAD package. So any assemblies, sub-assemblies that you might have had will be respected when you bring them over into KeyShot. And you can apply animations to individual parts on those assemblies or assemblies as a whole. In this case, I'll go ahead and select the lid, and I'll press next. And that will apply an animation and start to play it back in the timeline. Okay, so there are a couple things wrong here that we need to address. First thing I'll do, just for organizational purposes, is rename the animation. I'll call it lid open. And the other thing I noticed when I played this back is that it's opening in the wrong direction. The orbit is not occurring the direction I need it to. So the animation was set to 90 degrees, so I need it to go the other direction. So I'll place a minus sign in front of that and change it to negative 90. And now it should open in the correct direction. Okay. Now, the next problem that needs to be addressed is the fact that the part is not actually orbiting around the correct pivot point. By default, it will open around the center of the part. And so what I can do is, under this pivot point area in the animation properties, is choose a separate pivot point. So there was a hinge that was actually modeled in here, and what I can do is I can set that hinge as the pivot point for this animation. So we'll go over to Helper Object, select Pick, and we'll select Pivot Helper. And now you can see the lid is opening up in the correct direction. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that animation for now. Go ahead and click Finish. Now the nice thing about the KeyShot 3 animation system is its flexibility. I've already set a duration on here, but if I want to expand the duration, maybe make this laptop opening take a little longer, I can do so right here down in the timeline. So I'll select this lid open animation. And if I hover near the end of the actual animation, you can see that my cursor changes to this double arrow. And what I can do is start to actually extend the duration of this. You'll notice some numbers up here in the timeline, and these represent seconds. So 2 seconds, 4 seconds, 6 seconds. So right now our animation time will take a duration of 8 seconds. And you can see now when I move the time slider, it actually takes that full duration of time. The other thing you can do is you can shift this layer in the timeline and actually make the animation occur later in time. So if I run my slider here, you'll notice that the lid doesn't start opening until we get to this particular animation. The other thing you can do in the timeline is you can adjust the scale of this. If I am working within a range of 8 seconds, and I know that's the entire duration of my animation, I can move this scale slider up so that I can work on a scale that fits within my total animation time. Okay, there's another way that you can add animations, and that's via the project window. So I'll close my timeline for now, and let's go over to the project window. So maybe I would like to show some of the individual components of this particular laptop. maybe I'd like to lift this whole lid off after it's opened up, and then maybe lift the keys out of the body of the laptop. So what I can do is I'll select lid here in the project window. Again, this is your hierarchy that came over from your CAD application. You can also see the lid open animation that is applied there. When I do select it, the animation parameters are displayed there for you, so you can change any of that. Okay, so let's actually separate this lid from the laptop. So right click on it to add animation, and in this case we'll do a translation. Now, the first thing we need to do is actually adjust when this translation occurs in time. By default, it is placed at the beginning of the timeline, so what I need to do is grab this translation and move it down till it's past the first rotation. And now, if I move the time slider, we should see the rotation occur, and then as soon as we get to the translation, that will occur as well. So in this particular case, let's go ahead and move this laptop lid backwards away from the body of the laptop. So we do have some translation on the Y, and let's set some translation on a different axis and see what we end up with. Let's go with 1 on the Z, and it looks like that's bringing the laptop lid closer to us. So let's push it back. We'll do negative, and let's set a value of 2. Okay, so that actually lifts the laptop lid away from the laptop. Now let's lift the keys off of the body. So here we have our keys, and we can do the same thing. Let's go ahead and right click on the keys, say add animation, and we'll do a translation. Okay, so you can see how the keys are lifted off now, but again, we need to have those occur later in time. So we'll go ahead and shift them down in the timeline, and let's extend the duration of this. Let's make it take about 2 seconds. So again, how I'm doing that is I'm looking at the numbers in the timeline and using those for my reference, and I'll also extend the duration of the lid translation. All right, let's also name our animations for organization purposes. So for translation 3, we'll rename that keys translation. And for the lid translation, we will name that lid translation. Okay. So now we've got a little bit of organization going on there. And let's move our time slider to see what we have. So we should have our laptop lid opening up, and then moving backwards, and then we should have the keys lifting off. And what about when we want to put this back together? Let's see how we would actually go about doing that. So we have our lid translation, and what we ended up doing is we went 1 unit on the Y and -2 on the Z. So to put this back, we basically are going to want to reverse those values. So we'll add another translation animation. Slide that down in time. We'll extend the duration, and we'll call this lid original position. Okay, and so again, we got to reverse those values. So it was a -1 that we needed on the Y. And yeah, should be a +2 on the Z. So let's move our time slider there, and we should have the lid moving back into position. And let's do the same for the keys. So I'll collapse my lid hierarchy, expand the keys, and we had a translation on the Y, so we need to add a value of -1 on the Y with this particular translation. Okay, so move this down in time, extend that duration, and we'll change our translate Y value to -1. That should place the keys back where they belong. And the last thing we'll do is go ahead and close this lid. So we can right click on the lid, add an animation, select rotation, and we'll move this down in time. And remember, we need to set our pivot point for this. So here's how you do this when you're not in the wizard. You do have your animation parameters. So we'll go ahead and set a helper object, and we do have that pivot. So we'll go to pivot helper, select OK, and now we should have our complete animation. And as you can see, this is just a very flexible system. If you want to increase duration or change when things happen in time, it's very easy to do so by shifting these elements around in the timeline. Last thing I'll do, we'll call this lid close. Remember to stay organized while you work. And if I want to output a quick preview animation of this, I can do so by going to the preview button. First thing I'll do though is I'll go ahead and save. Always important to save your work. And go ahead and click this preview button. And what this is going to do is this is going to quickly output low resolution, basically just a draft preview of your animation. That way you can check your motion, check your timing, the duration of everything, and make sure it's all good before you fully commit to the longer render time for your high quality output. So you can see here the lid is actually starting to open up. And when this is all said and done, it will compile a movie for you. When you're ready to output your final high-quality movie, you can do so by going to the render window. We'll press render, and right away you'll notice some things have changed. You have the option to do a still image, or you have the option to do an animation. For the animation, you can set your resolution, or you can choose from a list of presets. You can set your time range. Entire duration will include all animations that you have added to the timeline, or you can set a specific area. The area is indicated by these blue flags in the timeline. If I wanted to only include the opening portion of the laptop, I can move this blue flag here, select work area, and that will only render that area of the animation. In this case, we'll go ahead and go with entire duration. And then you have the option to set your frame rate. So if you want something other than 25 or 24 or 30, you can do that. You have the option to include video output. So this will automatically compile all your frames into a compressed movie. So you do AVI MPEG-4, AVI uncompressed, QuickTime MPEG-4, or Flash video. And you can also output all your frames. Once you're ready to render, go ahead and press render, and it will go through all your animation.